Hello, my name is Beth Ann Fennelly, and I'm the Poet Laureate of the great state of Mississippi and a professor at the university here. And I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the Oxford Conference for the Book Poetry panel. OCB is one of my favorite weekends every year, and I love the opportunity to invite some poets down to wander among the azaleas and the stacks of books at Square Books and maybe drink some brown liquor on Faulkner's grave and make some new connections and enjoy the warm weather. This time around is a little bit different, but thanks to the magic of the internet, we are still able to bring some phenomenal poets to you. And in fact, I thought about three poets for today: an old friend, a new friend, and someone I'd like to befriend. So I'll start with the old friend first. Sandra Beasley first came to us in 2010 when she was a summer poet in residence here at the University of Mississippi. She was here for a month. She gave a great reading and kind of wowed everyone who met her with her energy and vivacity and being a big proponent of poetry. She reached out to the students and she stayed in touch with the community ever since. In fact, she recently edited the Southern Foodways Alliance's anthology of food in verse called Vinegar and Char, which is a really fun collection. So knowing that Sandra had a new book of poems coming out, it seemed very fitting that she would kick off our panel today. Here is Sandra's official bio. Sandra Beasley is the author of 4 poetry collections: Made to Explode, coming out very shortly from W.W. Norton; Count the Waves; I Was the Jukebox, which won the 2009 Barnard Women Poets Prize; and Theories of Falling, as well as Don't Kill the Birthday Girl, Tales from an Allergic Life, a disability memoir and cultural history of food allergies. Honors for her work include the 2019 Munster Literature Center's John Montague International Prize in Poetry, a 2015 NEA Fellowship, and 5 DC Commission on the Arts Awards. Sandra Beasley lives in Washington, DC. Let's give her a listen.
Hi, I'm Sandra Beasley. I'm so pleased to join you all for the Conference for the Book. I'm just sorry we can't all be in the same room in Mississippi. But today I am going to share poems from Made to Explode, which is my 4th collection, just out from W.W. Norton in February. These are poems that I would say started with food as an access point. I was editing an anthology for the Southern Foodways Alliance. Then reading everyone else's food poems made me think of my family's own food traditions. Or in the poem you're about to hear, maybe some of the less traditional traditions. But I should mention that all of my researched tater tot facts are entirely true. And in a way, this is a celebration of the traditions that we make from what is not traditional. Heirloom. Lo, 12 children born to a woman named Thankful in Nampa, by the border between Oregon and Idaho, or as it will be remembered, or Ida. Lo, 2 of her sons drive to Miami, not knowing if their plan will work. Lo, what were once waste scraps fed to the cows, now repackaged, the fry shavings sliced, spiced, and oiled. Lo, a chef at the Fontainebleau takes the bribe. Lo, tater tots are dished onto the tables of the 1954 National Potato Convention and soon enshrined in the freezers of America. 3 decades later, the golden age of my childhood is a foil-lined tray plattered with Ida product, maybe salt, maybe nothing but hot anticipation of my fingertips. Lo, my mother is a great cook, and lo, my grandmother is a terrible one. But on tinfoil plains, they are equal. I need you to understand why my father will never enjoy an heirloom tomato, glistening, layered in basil. Put away your Brandywines, your Cherokee purples, your green zebras. Lo, as with spinach, as with olives, he tastes only the claustrophobia his mother unleashed from cans to feed 4 children on a budget. We talk little of this. Lo, what is cooked to mush. Lo, what is peppered to ash. Lo, the flavor rendered as morning chore, that this, too, is a form of love. So one of the things I considered with this collection is the fact that I was raised in Virginia, but Northern Virginia, and I've now lived in Washington, D.C. for the last 20 years. So I feel like I'm at a particularly odd nexus of what it means to be Northern or Southern in one's culture. D.C. in and of itself is an odd place. I'm blocks from the National Mall. We were kind of taken over by barricades in recent weeks. But I love my city. I love the monuments, memorials here, even as I realize how problematic it is what they choose to encode as our history. And you do get very strange moments. In this next poem I'm going to read, which is part of a whole suite of prose poems about kind of being in DC, being of DC, the speaker finds herself in a theater where, lo and behold, a Supreme Court justice is there in the audience as well, which is great, although it gives one a double take when you consider the play that everyone is about to watch together. Kiss me. Ruth Bader Ginsburg sits in the 19th row of my heart, while on stage a woman has been conscribed to the shape of a shrew. The actress has 40-carat eyes, an aquiline nose, her shoulders slight, her waist small enough. She is spanked over our hero's knee. Everyone is laughing except the conductor, who must steady his baton, and the house manager, who has seen it before, and the actors directed instead to be aghast, agape, gawking, agog, whatever Cole Porter rhymes with dismayed, and Ginsburg, who adjusts the pearl clipped to her ear. She curls the program in her lap. This is tiring, attending theaters of the heart. She doesn't relish it as Sandra Day O'Connor did, sipping Prosecco at the intermission of Porgy and Bess. The gangster's soft shoe, reminding us to brush up on our Shakespeare. The actress sings, "I am ashamed that women are so simple." Soon, Kate will be tamed. That's how we know the ending is happy. This is another poem from that series. A lot of them are posited in the imagined space of being at a monument or a memorial at midnight. Anybody who lives in this area knows that the National Park Service makes sure that you can technically go to these places at any time of day. I've done the 2 a.m., the 3 a.m. visit to a memorial. This is one of the most noticeable shapes in the tidal basin. It's called Jefferson Midnight. In another version of this story, he is a naturalist who dabbled in politics. He reinvented the plow. He joined the American Philosophical Society's Bone Committee, and while trying to prove the great Western lion, gave us our first giant sloth. He shipped a rotting moose to France to demonstrate the greatness of our mammals. He is a father of paleontology who didn't believe extinction was part of God's plan. He asked Lewis and Clark, should they encounter the mammoth, to capture one. For months, his seawall has been sinking, the Potomac's mud flats sucking at support timbers. In 1918, and for 6 summers after, The tidal basin was chlorinated, so this bank could become a beach. Whites only. Spiders who are drawn to rising heat populate the ceiling of Jefferson's Memorial. Once the sun sets, the temperature drops, they lose their grip and fall. Bodies bounce off my shoulders, bodies land in my hair. Guards call this the spider rain. So part of my connection to Mississippi and the reason why I'm so fond of this community and this conference is that I've spent much of the last 10 years being on the road, traveling extensively through connections to Oxford, to Tampa, where I taught for a number of years, really to Greater Florida, where my husband's family is as well. So this is just a playful poem, kind of riffing along that food theme, specifically the tradition of roadside stands. And it's called simply Rhymes With. I stop off on Route 301 to debate between quarter-bushel bags of oranges. Temples and Ortoniques I'll bring back to the presser we bought cheap, scrubbed clean. Wherever promises the stamped metal. I have been in lust with Florida's strange, her match of pastel blue to forest green, her north more southern than her south. How alligators and crocodiles share 9 miles of pond, with one shore brackish, the other fresh. Sporange, promises the dictionary, or Blorange, a mountain in southeast Wales. In moments like this, I must pitch my stance so that I don't fall down the mountain into a Welsh valley, into the river of Usk. We'll work for an hour, slicing and pressing, until we've filled 2 bottles to the brim. What 2 bodies couldn't make music within such a tight embrace of aluminum? One of the things that I swore to myself in composing this collection was that I was going to take back writing poems about grandmothers. You already heard one mentioned in the poem Heirloom, but I don't know where along the way it became uncodified that if you were writing about grandmothers, it was going to be sentimental or lesser. I know that my fellow reader for this program, Teri, and I have talked about this. No, write about the grandmothers, claim them. So this is a poem for mine. Card table. A practical gift for moving to the city, good cherry squared around black vinyl, 4 long legs that could fold within itself as a greyhound does, disappearing into a nap. Just big enough for a bridge match if I'd ever had 4 people willing to kiss knees. Just big enough to let me call a corner of that S Street studio my breakfast nook. Stacked with a week's worth of newspapers while I ate cereal cross-legged on my futon. Just big enough to pull out every few years and complain how small the table was, too crowded as a desk, too low for my chairs. In January, we stared at the strange space wedged between 2 kitchen doorways. Might as well try the card table. We stacked onions there, then potatoes, then tomatoes and peaches, and it became the chopping table, stirring table, serving table. Now the first morning she is gone, I see a swipe in the vinyl where a hot dish burned through and realize I forgot to ask for anything. A ring, her sheet music, So what I have is this reminder that she too was once a girl in a city, and that she knew I'd always need a table. I'm going to finish by reading the last poem. So you're getting the first and the last poem of this book. This is, again, inspired by those long road trips, but it's also in dialogue with a poem by C.P. Cavafy, Ithaca, which some of you may know, and if you do know it, it riffs again on the Odyssey, so a riff on a riff, so to speak. You'll hear certain phrasing, certain structures that are echoing Cavafy. And of course, in the Odysseus myth, you have someone who ranges far from home and takes far too long to return, and along the way has any number of adventures, has foes, and Odysseus was brilliant and brave, but he was also a trickster, and his behavior was maybe not always the finest. This poem is kind of wrestling with that, but it was also an excuse to write about boiled peanuts, because I had just edited a whole anthology of Southern verse, and I needed a boiled peanut poem. Epic. After C.P. Cavafy's Ithaca. As I set out for home, back home to my apartment, to my vengeful cat, back home to a betrothed who never was one for textile arts, I hope the voyage is a long one. I hope that Homer finds me on my great journey on a bar stool in Ocala one March Sunday at noon. Though it occurs to me after I am served the bowl of boiled peanuts that my hunger in this moment is not heroic. Who am I in these stories? One by one, I shell those soft bodies warm against my bottom teeth, tipping meat into my mouth. Did they too once have names? Did they too once have sons? How silly they look in their little boat with its checkered placemat sail. I take a swig of Bloody Mary, spiked with ocean and jalapeno, the one eye of my forehead pulsing. I will get back in the car. I will drive another 800 miles with Aeolus' bagged breath stashed in my glove compartment. And if I find home poor, home won't have fooled me. I who have forged a life that consists of leaving my life. I'll recall I once sat at a bar wiping Cajun broth from my chin with a 12th cocktail napkin. Blame nobody, I sang. Nobody, nobody, nobody did this to me. Thank you all for your time.
Wow, thank you so much, Sandra, for that beautiful reading. It was a pleasure to hear those poems. Next, I'm happy to introduce my new friend, Teri Ellen Cross Davis. I met her just 2 years ago out in Maryland for the Hoko Blitzo Poetry Society. I went to Teri's class and loved the way she talked about metaphor and poetry, and knew from her enthusiasm and passion for poetry that she would be a good poet herself. And it turns out that is very much the case. Then I put it together that she is the person at the Folger Shakespeare Library who's in charge of this creative programming that they've done the last several years, where she invites interesting poets of all stripes and all kind of proclivities to come and do poetry events at different places. And that same energy she brings to her programming and creativity is what she brings to her work. I was thrilled to hear she has a new book coming out, and I'm excited for you to hear poems from it. Teri Ellen Cross Davis is the author of A More Perfect Union, awarded the 2019 Journal Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize, and Haint, awarded the 2017 Ohio Anna Book Award for Poetry. She is the winner of the Poetry Society of America's 2020 Robert H. Winter Memorial Award. She's received fellowships and scholarships from Cave Canem, the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, Hedgebrook, Community of Writers, Poetry Workshop, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, the Hermitage Artist Retreat, and the Swanee Writers Conference. She's the poetry coordinator for the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., and we're so happy to bring her to you today.
Hi, my name is Teri Ellen Cross Davis. Thanks so much to Beth Ann Fennelly. I'm so glad for this invitation and for this opportunity to join you all at the Oxford Conference for the book. I'll be reading from two collections. Most of the work will be from from my second collection, A More Perfect Union, which is out this year, and one poem from Haint, this is the rare audience where I think I may not have to define what a haint is. I think many of you may already know. So let's get the show on the road. So I'll start off with a poem called A Black Woman Gets a Window Seat on Aer Lingus. For those of you who don't know, Aer Lingus is the dominant airline in and out of Ireland. And I've had the incredible privilege and pleasure of visiting Ireland in the last few years and really love it there and appreciate it so much, even though you may hear things in this poem that might lead you to think something different. Don't. I love Ireland. I'd love to go back. A black woman gets a window seat on Aer Lingus. Enough, Ireland. For all your lush effusion of color, inside me blooms a masochistic loneliness. Give me the screws I know best. The policeman quick to test my yes sir as acid-less. Trigger the Midwest. Never on the Bible school test was this. Crucifixion kills, not nails into feet or wrists, but the weight borne upon the breast. You suffocate slowly in your own flesh. As I return to the upright cross of the U.S., I breathe easier. I breathe less. In A More Perfect Union, I created 9 goddesses of my own invention, my own creativity, and I'll be sharing some of those poems with you today. This first poem of those goddess poems is called The Goddess of Scars, something I think everyone can relate to. The Goddess of Scars. I mark you with melanin, a crosshatch of collagen. Better the scar than the loss of limb. Better the clean line, raised itch, festering wound, beckoning death. My apostles, my keloids, my atropic, my contractures, my hypertrophic response, each a love I bear to the mammal of you, the ruptured vessel, the broken endermis. Consider my evolution a song to survival. Consider cells my priest, their work a ladder of prayer, each stitch an epistle. I grieve to see you separate from yourself. My atonement is a bridge to build you back together. While you can never be born again, you can recover. Each time I sign you, witness the parable of action and consequence. I do not think you show enough reverence. You were never meant to be a smooth canvas, but a texture, a testament. I bless you with a story, and each and every time you live to tell the tale. And this is a poem from my first book, Haint, and it's called Let Down. And just so you know, let down is the phrase they give it when the milk comes into your breast when you're nursing. I have 2 children who I was able to breastfeed, my daughter for 18 months and my son for 25 months. And I'm very thankful for the privilege of having an office where I could keep my breast pump, a refrigerator that I could have access to, as well as a sink, all necessary things for working nursing moms. And I hope more women have those things available to them. Let down. The books say that milk let down feels like pins and needles, but when you're pumping at work, it's more like lungs constricting under the crush of chlorinated water. You know, God willing, when she's 16 or 25, you'll never be this essential again. So remember this smothering need now, the engorged breasts, the suction, the release. Know the ache swelling and flowing from you is caused by your hands cradling plastic bottles, that your warm, twisting baby is elsewhere, away from you. Know the sadness will threaten to sweep you under each time you take out the pump, and you can't swim away from it. You must do this for her. You must stay. You must drown. And trying to be a good mother, I try and balance it out. So that was a poem about my daughter. Here's a poem about my son. It's called Crescendo. My son nests, pawing each pillow like a breast, fleshed out and so newly forgotten. I've spanked him once tonight. He takes turns laughing, then crying, defiant, then hungry. In his mouth, my name, all need. Pursed lips plead, Mommy, and I am guilty of the same sin. I miss his curled and tucked weight, embryo, the deepest root yanked clean. This is why babies are born crying into this world. Having held fast to such an intimate tether, who willingly would let go again? But today, another white cop walked free. Another black body was still on the ground, not indicted, undoubtedly the future outcome. 4 years ago, I crossed labor's red sea of pain to birth a boy. No doctor hit his backside. Now I raise my hand to complete an act older than me, breaking the black back of the boy to make a man who can survive in America. Mommy, he calls me, and my teats threaten to weep old milk at our stasis. Both of us needing the succor of sleep. Both of us fighting, him to keep me near, me punishing him to be left alone. He crawls into my lap. His heart is 3, his body a lanky 4. I cover him with a blanket too thin to mean it. We rock on the edge of his bed, listening to the symphony's 4th movement, the crescendo sweet, full of tension, violin strings singing. I think Mozart must have known something of loving with such a tender fear that it breaks you open like a welt that bleeds to heal. Tonight, I give up, cuddling this boy so full of belief in himself, I'm too tired with love to beat it out of him. And this is another goddess poem. This is called The Goddess of the South. And I lay claim to the South as my mother was born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas. My paternal grandparents were born and raised in Bessemer, Alabama, even though I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. The South came with them to Cleveland and surrounded me. So I give you the goddess of the South. I'm Mama, telling you the best way to rid them pimples was to wash your face with fresh morning urine. I'm there when your mama teaches you how to pick chitlins, small fingers finding bits of straw and bone until a full bucket is reduced to 1 plate. I was in your mother's hand as she rounded your head as a baby, them soft spots shifted into the curve of her palm. I'm the sugar, the baking soda, the cornmeal, and the cast iron skillet when your great aunt shows you how to make cornbread from scratch. I'm every bite of peach cobbler you sneak even though you're allergic to peaches. Remember how you ain't know Bessemer was Bessemer until a road trip to Atlanta brought you in shouting distance of Alabama? Or Auntie Shirley's real name was Sarah Lee. How I dragged your northern tongue, taught it to linger in the soft vowels, the syrup of me thick like Alaga in your mouth. I'm in every shotgun story you know. Like that time you and your sister heard that rattle when y'all was playing in the tall grass near Auntie Shirley's juke joint? How matter of fact, fluid that big woman was, putting a plate of freshly fried chicken in front of y'all with one hand, grabbing her shotgun with the other, and kept it stepping. But I evolved too, baby. My young preachers keep me so fresh and so clean. I gleam in the grits you pour butter on, and yes, sugar, because I do as you do, my beautiful brown children. When you spread to California, Wisconsin, New York, Illinois, and Ohio, you take me with you. You make neck bones. Teach your children how to work hard for such sweet little meat. You cut rabbit chunks into your oxtail soup. You house the children of this cousin, that daughter, this sister, and raise them as your own, arms always extended in a net of family, of blood. How I groomed you, child. Let you hear she ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. And what you get in the giddy up is what you get in the roundup. I'm always at your table. The hot sauce you want on Friday's fried fish, that hankering for smothered pork chops you get on a dreary November day. I lecture you in your sleep. When a shuddering of past relatives show up, you wake knowing it's been a visitation. If you tell your mama, she gonna reach for the numbers book. I keep one of your feet planted firmly in my red clay, be it Little Rock, Pine Bluff, or Crisp County, Georgia, with honeyed names like Nay, Cousin Peaches, Grease, Junebug. I keep your mind running in circles, connecting blood to family, friends, and back. Baby girl, you'll never be free of me. All the black bodies I've consumed, y'all's blood makes the soil shine. The roots of your family tree may shift, so some of the dirt falls across the Mason-Dixon line, but I will always claim you as mine, mine, mine. If you ever change your mind about leaving me behind. And this next poem is called Thank You, Jesus. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Jesus. When the blue and red sirens pass you, when the school calls because your child beat the exam and not a classmate, when the smartphone drops but does not crack, the rush escaping your mouth betrays your upbringing. Thank you, Jesus, a balm over the wound. When the mammogram finds only density, when the playground tumble results in a bruise, not a broken bone, like steam from a hot tea kettle, thank you, Jesus. And the pent-up fear vents upward, out. Maybe it's a hand over breast, supplication learned deeper than flesh, as if one could shush the soul, the fluttering heartbeat, with 3 words. Maybe it's not so dire, an almost trip on the sidewalk, the accumulated sales total showing savings upon savings. Maybe it's as small as an empty seat on the metro, or maybe, thank you, Jesus, becomes the refrain every time your husband pulls into the driveway, alive and whole, and no one has mistaken him for all the black scary things. You mutter it, helpless to stop yourself from the invocation of a grandmother who gave you your first Bible. You say it because your mother, even knowing your doubt as a vested commodity, still urges prayer. You learned early to cast the net. Thank you, Jesus. And it's a sweet needle that gathers the fraying thread, hemming security in steady stitches. From birth, you've heard this language. As an adult, you've seen religion used nakedly as ambition, yet this sacrifice of praise still slips past your lips, this lyrical martyr of your dying faith. And again, thank you all for your time and for your attention. And I'll leave you with this poem, The Goddess of Cleaning. I bequeath you bleach, its singeing sting. I bequeath you the scrub brush, best done on hands and knees. I bequeath you ammonia for the exorcism of dirt. I bequeath you power over clutter, the washing machine's spin, the dryer's lint grin. I bequeath you the salvation of sweeping, a consecrated grip on the broomstick. I bequeath you the dustpan's collection plate, the floor's sanctified echo, the trash bin's penitent face. I bequeath you the gospel of a mop, the sacred slosh of a rinse bucket's second coming. I bequeath you the torn t-shirt as rag, the two-sided sponge, vinegar and newspaper squeak, the glass free of streak. I bequeath you an old toothbrush for tiles hard to reach grime. I bequeath you the grunt and scrub of wool, the eradication of rust. Trust in me, I baptize you in sweat, labor's beatific stain. I bequeath you the power to change, one room at a time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Teri, for that beautiful reading. Now I'm excited to introduce you to a writer that I don't know, but would like to meet, Cortney Lamar Charleston. I came across one of his poems a few years back in the Pushcart Prize Annual and was blown away. And I've looked for his work ever since, and I found it everywhere. A very exciting, up-and-coming younger poet who you will be glad to tell your friends you saw here at the Oxford Conference for the Book Poetry Panel. Cortney Lamar Charleston is the author of Telepathologies, Saturnalia Books 2017, and Doppelgangbanger Haymarket Books 2021. He was awarded a 2017 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation. And he also has received fellowships from Cave Canem and the New Jersey State Council for the Arts. Winner of the Pushcart Prize, his poems have appeared in Poetry, the American Poetry Review, the Kenyon Review, Granta, The Nation, and elsewhere. He serves as poetry editor at The Rumpus and on the editorial board at Alice James Books. Thank you so much for joining us today, Cortney.
Hello, Cortney Lamar Charleston here, and I'm really excited and pleased to be part of the Oxford Conference for the Book this year. I will be reading a selection of work from my latest poetry collection, Doppelgangbanger, which is now available from Haymarket Books. And these poems are much more personal in nature. They veer more towards the autobiographical, but at the same time, they really make me joyful, for the playfulness of the language, the rhythms. And, I had a great challenge to go back in time and try to understand the lessons of adolescence as it pertains to race and masculinity and class. And I am delighted by the outcome of all of that effort. And today, as I read some of the work from this collection, I hope that the poems delight you just as much as they have delighted me. That's really, I guess, all I'll say to kick things off. But I want to thank you for your time and attention and your care. And without further ado, let's get into the poems. Lesson for Cortney, after Lewis Holt. Those are traffic lights. They help stop people from driving into each other. That's a crescent moon and star on top of that building. It means the people inside are part of the nation. That's a gas station. That's a McDonald's. That's a Burger King. That's a fried fish and chicken joint. This blue thing is a mailbox. It's for letters. You use it when you have someone to write to who left. You're right. That's an old car. The window broke, so they use a trash bag to keep the heat in or keep the cold out. This looks like a paper cut, son. That's a drop of blood. It's warm because you're warm inside. That's an ambulance for taking people to the hospital when they're hurt or losing blood. Not like you did, but a lot more than that. That's a police officer. That's a gun on his hip. Those are dangerous. That's a fire truck, and those people riding on the side of it are firefighters. That's really a church. They just put it inside an old store. Yes, that's a painting of Jesus. His skin is different colors in different people's houses sometimes. That's a bad school. Those metal bars keep bad people out. That's where grown-ups get their alcohol. Yes, kids get candy there. This is money, and this is money too. Not everyone has that. Don't pick that up. No, I'm not quite sure what that is. That's a tree, son. No, I've never climbed one or wanted to. Those are probably pigeons. Come on, you know that's a belt. No, belts aren't only for when kids are bad. This is a good school. This is why you're here. This is your uniform, a blue shirt and black pants. Yes, that's a picture of Jesus hanging over there. Remember what I told you about that. When I grow up, I want to be a martyr. Is surely a peculiar answer for any teacher to receive when asking a kindergartner. But on second take, what word best describes me? Crossbreed of butterfly and superfly aesthetics, other than peculiar. I suppose calling me a keen kid would also suffice in explaining my avidity for the kind of death that progresses the narrative of a gentling history, because that's the only frame for greatness I seem to find for boys my shade and age to aspire to, short of having the height and hops to touch the rim, or the bulk and burst to break through the defensive line like a bullet. And no, I Haven't given up on the prospect of Bulls starting shooting guard yet, but the God-fearer impressed upon me begs the mythology of goodness delivered to the multitudes like loaves and fish. How King is talked about in a Black Christian tradition still in mourning over his lost rays of light. The way mentioning the name of Malcolm makes mice of shady white men some 30 years after the shotgun and he's sung of as a prince. I want to evoke that level of pride in American democracy's dark downtrodden because I know what it invokes in me. Young and impressionable, watching Denzel's mimicry for the 1 millionth time in my abbreviated existence, drawing an X on my undeveloped chest, pushing it out into the unknown ahead, hoping a mecca for melanin rises from the man-shaped hole I'd left in my loved ones' lives. I bet my parents would be so proud of me. I bet post offices would close on my birthday. I bet God would dap me up when I got up there and Jesus dying on a cross to meet me. Sonic and Knuckles, 1994, for C. Luttrell. Sonic is a hedgehog, a blur, a ball of the bluest energy. Knuckles is an echidna. He's a blood-red climber of rocks. I'm the firstborn, like a ghost of my father in childhood. He's the secondborn, blessed with my mother's mouth. Knuckles is the echidna, a blood-red climber of rocks. Sonic is known for speed. He's my proto-protagonist. But am I for the boy blessed with my mother's mouth? He, more likely than me, moves towards his Knuckles. Correction. My parents were my real proto-protagonists. I quickly learned the game, traded obedience for freedom, and I wonder if that pushed him towards his Knuckles. Before Shadow the Hedgehog, the kid liked the echidna. But because I learned how to game obedience for freedom, I know a shadow to its sadness can achieve autonomy. Living in shadow has him punching walls like an echidna, but recall Knuckles wasn't a real villain, just an anti-Sonic. Is my shadow the reason he couldn't achieve autonomy? When folks say we favor, are they calling him a shadow? Trust me, he's not a bad seed, just acting like an anti-Sonic, and as I'm known by my speed to straight-lace, we knuckle. Being told we favor must feel like getting called a shadow, like getting pressured to shape your life in another's image. The boy known by his speed to straight-lace. So we knuckle, but we skip out on fists. They're proxied by clashing pixels. To relieve pressure, I say, shape your life in another image, but struggle when it's not an image I think he should own. And that fight can never be proxied by a clashing of pixels. So we glitch, our laughter frozen in 16 bits. We hit reset. I watch him struggle with what images he should disown. In this way, I become a ghost of my father and fatherhood. Blood is glitch-prone, so sometimes our eyes will be reset. While looking through my feelings, Sonic's energy is red. Moving day. New kids in the neighborhood. After Norman Rockwell. I pack my entire life into a box and then checkmark. Census says there are few like us where we're going. A land of milk. We are a posse as much as we are a family of 5, complexions of common connotation and towing a dog that looks like a coyote, even our minivan, the color of a slur. As we roll deeply down the unfamiliar highway, I look through the tinted window and make inferences. I've got a knack for naming the make of cars, but realize the further we get from familiar roads, the more foreign the brands. Japanese luxuries, German, Italian. Had I been just 2 years older, I'd recognize this as, possibly, the makings of a war. Instead, the grass distracts me. The abundance of it. The fresh diagonal cuts striping it with a touch of shade on every plot, sprinklers spitting on opposite sides of the smooth street. The houses themselves are clearly of the same pedestrian mind. A sense of order is baked into the architecture, the condition of parkland, and somehow this causes disturbance in me I fear replicating. Kids, who appear to be about my age, run between the gateless yards. Some bicycle with helmets and knee pads on, mothers policing from behind. When we pull up to the bricks that belong to us from now on, I pause a moment to take in the size compared to what I've known. The world, apparently, can't be as small as the saying goes. The driveway is a long shadow of the lanes we've stayed in to get here with the big mailbox at the end. It reminds me of the address I couldn't memorize for giving away. I wait forever for letters that never come, or at least till dark. I can't recall if the boys across the street spoke to me that first day, or if they just watched me stand there, patiently, from some immeasurable distance. I recall a large, empty room with light carpet, almost white. I recall starting to unpack my box, looking inside and it being so dark I couldn't be sure the bottom even existed. Still life with black boy's face overlaying project buildings. Hall of Famer Frank Thomas, from 1990 to 2005, hit 448 home runs over the fence for the White Sox, with the notorious Robert Taylor home standing just beyond ballpark grounds across the Dan Ryan Expressway. The high-rises, bruises against the city flag blue sky, eyesores. When the last tower came down, I don't remember the president, the mayor, or any other politician standing in front of the rubble with a megaphone vowing to get the ones who did this. Incrimination isn't done quite so publicly here, plus a project is a project is a project. Whenever folks rolled to Comiskey, they saw those towers and thought of G-Baby from Hardball, comedic little black boy baseball player shot outside a building that looked sort of just like those. Keanu Reeves' character was kind of torn up about the whole thing. Good riddance, their one red line train of thought, tears in their blue and green eyes. Hood riddance, too. As we drive past, I glimpse the ghost of my young face in the car window, overlaying the empty lot with reflection. It's a place where many people died, but many, many, many more lived. Those are the folks I identify with. I know what it's like to live. I have no idea what it means to die. I guess I'm not black in that way. I'm, as they say, blessed and highly favored. Trigonometry. For you, the first triangle, Father and Son and Holy Ghost, and you hear from everybody southern fried in your life the devil be a master mimic, be a mathematician speaking the language of the boot that kicked him out of those pearly gates. And you're smart, so you take notes. Sanctuary sits between 108th and 109th Streets on Halsted. That's in the hundreds. High numbers. Too many names of dead boys for you to count. And your church sits locked behind an iron gate. Black like both sides it divides. Both sides root for a basketball team that ran the triangle offense all the way to glory. And Jordan is God to this day. And people have died for his feet. So many over the years, nobody counts. And Chicago is the angle between sides, between brothers, a tangent of death. You question if the letters in your textbook are pronounced sign or sin. You know the devil be a shapeshifter. Nothing about this particular triangle is right. You're smart. You take notes. See that same shape in your history class drawn in red, a long trail of blood between Africa, Europe, and America that gives the ocean a crooked mouth on the map. It speaks to you, begs an old practice recall. Slaves, obey thy masters. And you're smart. So you realize that all you Southern frieds have been had are owned to this very day. It's all algebra, trig, you say, jotting your name boldly atop your test, that test itself being just another A++++. This is the final poem that I'll be reading. On recidivism. In hard times we fall on habit, or so shows the research. All the academic literature, and my look backwards into the texts of their troubled lives, even into my own text messages from these past 3 years overpopulated with ellipses and silences. I'm knee-deep in a thesis on the cyclical nature of imprisonment, which means that, statistically speaking, I'm knee-deep in an exploration of negritude, which is likewise an interior study with unflattering results. Survey says I fall back on withdrawal like my interviewees fall back on the block when nobody is willing to hire them legitimately. All of us are socially isolated, but with me it is slightly different as I have the vocabulary my professors have given me to describe and define it, one that white people can understand, in theory. But racism is more their problem to bear than mine at the moment. What unsettles me is undiagnosed, mixed into the cocktail of my blood with an angst about the future. Where I will find myself, where I will find the money, where I will find love if I believe I've already found it here. How selfish. How silly and straight sucker of me to think this way when I don't have to get my hands dirty like they do, be it in the dirt planting grass seed or selling a little bit of grass on the side. I sit at my keyboard and type a sentence about nonviolent offenses. I sit at my keyboard and type an email pleading for financial assistance to finish school. We play phone tag, the lot of us, with each other, with God, and that's just how all the stories get committed to the ethnography. Blacks are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of whites in Philadelphia. I type, Blacks make up 66% of Philly's daily prison population. I type, I pick up my phone and send a text. I'd have nowhere to go but back. If I don't get this degree, survey says, I was all for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cortney, for sharing those beautiful poems with us. And this ends our poetry panel, although perhaps we can, again, through this beautiful, power of the internet, watch it again one more time, perhaps. I would like to thank you all for tuning in today to hear these beautiful writers. And of course, I would like to thank them, Sandra, Teri, and Cortney. Thank you so much. Please order your book from Square Books. There are signed copies, hot off the presses, waiting for your hot little hands and your bookshelves. And a special shout out to Jimmy Thomas, who does the heavy lifting behind the Oxford Conference for the book, including figuring out how to pivot for this year's virtual conference, and Margaret Gaffney, who was in charge of a lot of the technical stuff that got these poets into your ears today. Thank you. Keep reading and have an excellent day.